Meseret Christos is a Protestant seminary. It's a Protestant religion in Ethiopia. The dominant religion is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. And at the Meseret Christos Seminary, I spoke to the students, I made a few comments, and when I finished, they gave me a tour of the school. And in making a tour of the school, they took me to the library. And when I walked into the library, I'm saying to myself, why do my hosts want me to go to the library? But there in the library, at the very far end, was the librarian, a young woman, and they said, we want you to meet her. And so I began to walk down this long aisle in the middle of the library, and I saw a young woman. And I would have been about 50 years old at that time. I looked at her, and I realized something was horribly wrong. She's a beautiful young woman, but her face was disfigured from about under her nose all the way across, from one ear to the other, down to her chin. And she had the most wonderful smile. I looked at her, I said, she looks like my secretary in my city council office, Renee Baker. I said, with one exception, her face is burned. And she just smiled at me, and I met her. Her name is Tigist Desi Alamaru. And I just got an email from her. But Tigist is a historical figure in the Meseret Christos Church because she was raised in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, Christian church, but at some point along the way, she converted to Protestantism. And what is Protestantism? We believe in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. We believe in the priesthood of all believers. And, as opposed to the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia, worship is conducted in Amharic, and, very few people, with the exception of the priests, really can even understand what's being said during the worship service. So Tigist had the audacity to convert to Protestantism. Now in America, that doesn't seem like that big a deal, but she converted. And when she converted, her mother and her father, some other family members were so upset with her, they physically grabbed her, kicking and screaming, and they dragged her down to the village priest. And there, they literally embarked upon trying to burn the religion out of her. And they held her down into a fire of charcoal and literally trying to burn God out of her. And when she passed out on top of the hot coals, they picked her up and were horrified, thinking that maybe she might have died. But she became, and still is, a figure of Christian evangelism in the Meseret Christos Church. That church today has now over 1 million people in it. And she is a revered person in that church. My church, the Plymouth United Church of Christ, brought her to America, paid for her to come to America to get plastic surgery, which was done in Syracuse. And she came to the church, she spoke at the church, we had an opportunity to fellowship with her. But I think about Tigist, and I think about her mother and father, the people that held her down into a fire. But one of the amazing things about Tigist is when she came up out of the fire, she had no hatred. She had no desire to get even or have revenge on her mother and father, but rather she evangelized to the mother and father, and they now are Protestants themselves. And what is the point I'm making? The point is, people will do bad things in the name of God. People will do bad things because they think they're doing the will of God, but they don't understand the will of God. If you're trying to burn somebody, if you're trying to kill somebody, that is not the will of God. And so Sister Tigist wrote me, and I'm so joyful because in the land of Ebel, she switched email. I didn't know how to get in touch with her. But we're back on the track right now. I promised you at the beginning of the service that I would tell you how I became a minister. I'd be lying if I told you that I was a childhood preacher. I'd be lying if I told you that I wanted to be a minister all my life. It's not true. The truth is, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But around 14, 15 years of age, I got together with Spencer Bearfield. Some of you in Detroit will know who he is. Spencer's parents had him playing a violin. They thought that was so nice and erudite. Spencer lived behind my house. There's an alley between our houses on Fullerton and Sturtevant. And I would get together with him. Sometimes I'd play the piano. Spencer would take his violin, and then when his mother and father weren't looking, he'd throw the bow down, turn the violin on its side, and we'd start playing R&B music in his living room. Well, the next year, at 16, I went to Cass Tech. At Cass, I met Dwight Andrews. And Dwight is pastoring in Atlanta. He likes to brag to me about how many members of my church in Detroit have joined his church in Atlanta. But what he may not know is that almost every one of those members that joined his church, they send money to Detroit. Now you think about that. Think about that. But anyway, Dwight and I became friends. We met in the music department at Cass Tech. At that time, I had learned how to play the trombone. I qualified as a trombone player. Harold Arnoldi, the music director, said I only have 5 people who can play a trombone in this school. At the level I want, I need a 6th man. He said, you can be my 6th man. And I said, sir, I'd like to play football. He told me, he said, young man, he said, you'll have to choose today what you play, but it won't be both. He said, I can't afford for anybody to hit you in your mouth. Your mouth is precious to me. I said, yes, sir. And I was thinking about it. I said, nobody ever told me my mouth was precious. And so Dwight and I played in all the bands. I figured we were playing. I had a horn in my mind 5 hours a day at Cass Tech. I had no idea about being a trombone player or being a musician. All I knew was it was my ticket to Cass Tech. And for a year, Dwight and I, after school, we'd get together sometimes with some boys on my block, Spencer Bearfield, Tyndall Prude. We needed a bass player. Dwight and I bought a book, How to Play the Bass. And I said, let's bring my brother Emery in. And Dwight and I taught Emery how to play the bass fiddle. And sooner rather than later, he discarded the bass fiddle and got an electric bass. And then we were on. And so we practiced. Floyd Jones Jr., we practiced for the better part of a year. And that next fall, a group that I don't know, Mike, if you were in that group, the Pre-Omegas, a Cass Tech group.
I know who they were.
But you knew who they were.
Oh, definitely.
They invited my band, I think because of Dwight. Dwight may have been in that group.
I was probably at that party.
They invited us to play a party at the Whittier Hotel.
I was at that party.
You were there.
Yes.
And that's the hotel where the Beatles stayed
Yes.
when they came to Detroit. And we only got paid about $10 or $15 a piece that night, but it was on. Carl Boyd was the other player. He lived on the block too, played the saxophone. So we called ourselves Seven Sounds. But, I never thought or dreamt about being a musician. All I knew was I got about $15 to play at the Whittier Hotel. And from then, it was on. We played at the Book Cadillac, the Book Sheraton Hotel, the Statler Hilton. We played the Riverfront Ballroom at Cobo Hall. We played at the Top of the Punch. Played at the the Disabled Veterans Building. We played at the Veterans Building. If you want to Google something about my band, Google the Veterans Memorial Incident. Were you at that party? You were there? And we played there that night with some of my classmates. Like Derek Tabor got beat up that night by the police. We played, Local 876, Local 212. We played all over Detroit, the Latin Quarter. And we were making more and more money. And by the time I got ready to graduate from college, we were making $100 a night. We started about $10 or $15, but we were making $100 each. And it was getting serious then. And I had never thought about being a minister. But then, because we were making $100 a night, I said, well, you know, maybe this is what I'll do for the rest of my life. And I began to think about it, and I said, and I told the band this, I said, if we don't have a contract to record music, or if we have not recorded by the time I'm 21, I said, I'm 21. I said, then I'm out. And I'll give you the short version of what happened. It was really, there's a whole lot of other stuff that went on. But it was a wonderful thing. In the second year of college, I was at Boston University. I got homesick for the band, and I started flying back on the weekends. Think about that. We were making enough money my second year of college. That would have been about 1970. I was making enough money to fly back here on the weekends, 2 or 3 times a month. And I just began to think about it. I said, at the rate I'm going, I'll never graduate. And so I transferred back to Wayne State, to the chagrin of my mother. My father, on the other hand, he said, Nick, since you're coming back to Detroit, he said, I have a favor. I said, what's that? He said, would you be willing to build a junior high youth ministry? I said, okay. And so I became a youth leader at about age 18, 19. And I built a really big youth group. We had 100 or more children in that group. It was a great experience. But I told myself, I prayed to the Lord, I said, God, show me what to do. And at that point, I really didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew that the band was becoming more and more frustrating. And I put a self-imposed timetable. I like working with the children at the church so much. I said, you know, I think I could do this for the rest of my life. And sure enough, by the time I got ready to graduate, there was no contract, there was no recording. And I told the band, I said, I'm out. And we sold our equipment to the church, and I went to Yale Divinity School, and I've never looked back. Now, I'd be a liar if I told you that I was a child preacher, because I didn't preach as a child. I'd be a liar if I told you I knew all along I wanted to be a preacher. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm a pretty good preacher. I'm a pretty good minister. And I'm good enough as a minister to be able to preach anywhere. It doesn't matter if the church has heat. It doesn't matter if the church is flooded out. It doesn't matter if I can't preach at the church. All I know is that God is working through me. And so I just want to leave you with this word. God has a plan for your life. You may not be able to see it. You may not be able to feel it. You may not be able to know it. But God is trying to talk to you right now. And I want you to know, I'm praying for you. I want you to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and to understand that God has a reason for you to live. Not a reason to flounder, not a reason to mess up, but a reason to live. And I give you this good news this day. I'm praying for you, and I'm hoping for you, and I look to see you soon in church. Those of you who are out of town, keep looking at this service and tell your friends. God bless and God keep you.